Haunted Childhood House. Hi, I don't usually post on Reddit, mostly here to read. However, I feel the need to share the story of my childhood house. I lived in this house from ages 2 to 13. It was a smaller bungalow. There were 3 small bedrooms down a long hallway that led to the living room. There was a finished basement with a concrete room which was intended to be used for cold storage. I remember being absolutely horrified of this room. I always used to see shadows of a creature or human-like figure which appeared to be watching me whenever the door was left open. I would refuse to go anywhere near the room and would cry hysterically if I got too close. Additionally, whenever either of my parents went into the basement, I would stand at the top of the stairs screaming bloody murder, begging my parents to not go near the room and to return to the main floor. Upstairs, my room was directly across the small hallway from my parents. I would refuse to enter the hallway at dark, and my mom told me I often would wake up screaming and crying in the night, begging her to sleep in my bed with me so the shadows wouldn't hurt me. In the living room, I remember playing or watching the TV. At the corner of my eye, I would always see an older couple with outfits that appeared to be from the 1800s. The man was wearing a top hat and a black suit that was shorter in the front and longer in the back. The woman was wearing a dress that was wide at the bottom and had a corset top. This couple would pace back and forth down the hallway, often stopping for a couple of seconds before turning around to pace the other way. However, every time I turned my head to confirm what my peripheral vision saw, they would disappear. Up until the day we moved at the age of 13, I refused to be alone in the house due to the grim feeling of being watched that I was overcome with any time I entered the house. I would wait in the backyard for 2 hours until my father got home from work so I didn't have to be home alone. Immediately after we moved, these feelings and my history of night terrors stopped completely. Now this is where the story gets interesting, to me at least. Fast forward a decade later, now in my 20s, I was having lunch with my mom and her best friend when the topic of our old house came up in conversation. I began telling my mom about how eerie I felt as a kid living there, but quickly brushed it off as being a child with an active imagination when reflecting on the experiences as an adult. However, my mom informed me she had the same feelings and odd experiences in that house, but never told me as she didn't want to scare me. My mom began to describe an old couple she would see walking down the hallway. I couldn't believe it. Finishing each other's sentences, we discussed the same couple, almost word for word with their description. My mom even told me she used to have a priest come over every couple of months while I was at school to bless the house. I still consider myself a bit of a skeptic, but it's really hard to explain my mom seeing the same couple as I did, despite never discussing them with one another. My Abuelo story, or Grandpa's story. Hey guys, so these experiences that I am sharing will be a mix of my mother's, sister's, and my own. So first, let's start with a bit of backstory. My grandfather passed away when my mom was about 8 years old. He unfortunately met the end of his life when he was robbed and killed when he was going to his business very early in the morning. Now that we have that information, let's get into the paranormal experiences, starting with my mother. After my grandfather's passing, give or take 3 months, my great aunt went to visit my grandma and the kids. According to my mother, my great aunt was a loving and caring woman and had a great relationship with my grandparents. One night, while everyone was asleep, my mom woke to the sounds of my great aunt convulsing as if she couldn't breathe. With my mom being so young and unable to understand what was happening, woke up her older brother to tell him what was happening. My uncle went to my grandmother to wake her up, and once she went to check up on my great aunt, she announces that my great aunt has passed away. Now you're probably wondering, why am I telling you this story? A few months prior to my grandfather's and great aunt's passing, they both had an agreement. The agreement being that whoever passes away first would come back for the other so that they can go to heaven together. For what my mom remembers, she said that when they both agreed that it was just a joke, but I guess my grandfather held his end of the deal. Fast forward about 35 years, I was in the 4th grade, and during that summer, my mom and I decided to redo my room. After a long day of painting the walls, I had to sleep on the couch in the living room so the paint could dry. My parents' room is right next to the living room, and they offered to leave their door open since they were aware that I was afraid of the dark. That night, I had woken up at some odd hour, and when I turned over on the couch, I was able to see into my parents' room. To my surprise, I see a dark figure in the shape of a man on my mom's side of the bed. A part of me was scared, but the other part felt like I knew who this dark figure was. The dark figure was just looking at my mom, and with very little I could see into their room. It looked like the figure was going to lean over and touch my mom's arm. I whispered, "Leave her alone," and turned over, but when I looked back into my parents' room, the dark figure was gone. A few days later, my mom was looking through pictures and shows me one and says, "Oh look, this is what your grandpa looked like." Looking at the photo, I started realizing that the black figure that I thought I knew could have well been my grandfather. Now for my sister's experience. This one comes in the form of dreams. My sister has been stating that a few nights she's been having dreams, where in these dreams she wakes up, and when she turns her head to look at the chair in her room, she sees my grandfather looking at her and her son. She says that he only looks at them and smiles. He never says anything to her, but just by his demeanor, she feels safe around him, as if to reassure her that everything is going to be okay. She's still confused as to why he goes to her every so often, and why he never says anything. She came to say goodbye. When I was younger, I was more perceptive to the paranormal. I have a few tales of ghosts and other spooky experiences. It has been a while since I've actually seen something. I occasionally get knocking on doors, missing items, or the occasional feeling I'm being watched when there's no one around. My parents' home is definitely haunted. It's older than the city they live in, and at the border of an even bigger, older city. We've had many experiences there. In the 15 years we have lived there, we know the house is haunted by something. What it is, we are not sure. This experience isn't related to it, a different experience altogether. I don't know if this is considered a ghost, to be honest, because who we saw was technically still alive at the time. I think I was still in high school, because I was doing homework on the dining room table. My dad and brothers were also in the room watching the TV we have in there. We rented a room in the house to a friend of the family, a large Mexican man. He was taking a shower in the bathroom that was next to the kitchen, adjacent to the dining room. He did this every day after work at around the same time. Behind the kitchen was our den, which had the door to the backyard and my mother's garden. I remember my mom had gone out to the garden. It was getting dark, and my mom suddenly rushed in from the backyard and zoomed past us, and she went upstairs to their room. So fast we didn't see her face. I remember my dad and I looked at each other amused. He even asked, "What's her rush?" 2 minutes passed and the bathroom door opened. It was my mom. She had been the one in the bathroom taking a shower. Our tenant also walked into the house from work at the same moment. My dad immediately got up and went upstairs because obviously someone broke in. There was no one upstairs. He checked every room. No one left the house either because we had a view of the front door. Our tenant didn't see anyone go out on his way up the street. It really freaked us out. A couple of hours later, we got a call that my aunt, Mom's older sister, had a stroke and was in a coma 2 hours earlier. My aunt looked a lot like my mom, same height and body build. She waited for us basically to travel to her 6 hours away and to say goodbye and then pass away. We do have something in the house that occasionally mimics people. However, it's never mimicked someone who doesn't live there. Let me know if you want to read those stories. This was very different though, because the thing always leaves you feeling uneasy after seeing it and usually doesn't move. She power walked across 4 rooms and up the stairs. My mom likes to think my aunt tried to say goodbye as she left our world. I like to think that too. I don't know if anyone else has had an experience like this, or if it's considered a ghost. When my daughter was 3. My daughter is 9 years old now. She's growing up way too fast. She has always been an old soul. She has always had a way with people and animals. When she was a baby, she used to enjoy sitting outside in the front yard on a blanket and playing. There was a little tree in our front yard with a robin's nest. When my daughter was outside, the robin would come down and hang out just a few feet from her and keep her company. For my daughter, it was a completely normal thing. She would talk to it, and the robin would stay for several minutes and then fly away. It was like they understood each other, and it was so amazing to watch. Her aunt lives several hours away on a ranch in the southeast corner of the state. My wife and kids went down there for a visit one weekend when my daughter was 3. The ranch has been in that family for over 100 years. They live in the same ranch house that was originally built back then too. The matriarch of the family died several years earlier, long before my daughter was born. This woman's name was Elizabeth, which is my daughter's name too. I didn't know that when we named my daughter. It was just a happy coincidence. During this visit, my daughter was downstairs playing. Everyone was upstairs playing cribbage. My wife heard my daughter talking and laughing, so we went down to check on her. She asked who my daughter was talking to, and she said, "The other Elizabeth." My wife brought her back upstairs with her, and my daughter talked about this other Elizabeth to everyone else. She told everyone that this Elizabeth was an old woman wearing a dress. The aunt, my sister-in-law, retrieved the photo album and asked my daughter to just look through it. She didn't tell my daughter to look for anyone. She just said that she wanted to share some old pictures with her. My daughter, Elizabeth, took to looking at the photo album. When she came across the other Elizabeth's photo, my daughter pointed her out and said, "That's her. She lives here too." After that, my daughter never saw her again. At least, she never said so. Anyway. My old haunted house. I lived in this house for a little over a year back in 2017. It was a white 2-story house that was obviously old. Our landlords were an old Korean couple who left some items in the house when we were renting it. These included an old painting in the basement, a chest, and a mannequin in the attic, which were both wet and smelled funky. I initially felt nothing weird about the house and didn't for a while. I'd had some experiences beforehand, but not as bad as this house. So let's get to the interesting parts. Activity started to peak a few months into living there, and they weren't positive one bit. One night, I was sleeping on the couch in my living room watching TV. There was a walkway that led into the dining room, which I could see into from the left side opposite of the staircase, which was on my right. Not a very big living room. We had an Alexa sitting on a little table in the dining room. The Alexa first lit up on its top ring and started playing what sounded like Mexican music. This music played for about 1 minute before completely stopping. The Alexa stayed lit for a few seconds, then turned off. During this time, I was both confused and also scared because no one said anything to activate the Alexa. This wasn't my last experience in the house. Another night in the living room, I heard footsteps coming from the staircase, and I heard a deep growl like from an animal. I shut my eyes hard and tucked in my blanket to make myself feel safe because I felt certain I would be attacked. But nothing came, only the intense feeling of being watched while I cowered in fear. Another night, I wanted to go up to use the bathroom. Coincidentally, the light switch for the stairs happened to be up the stairs, meaning I had to walk upstairs in the dark. We had a laundry chute built into the wall on the side. Because I saw nothing, I wasn't aware that the chute was wide open, which slammed shut, making a super loud clapping sound on the polished wood. Startled, I ran right back downstairs and cowered in my blanket on the couch. Whenever I would sleep in my room, I would hear footsteps lightly walking through the hall and making obvious creaks in the floor, and always stopping at my bedroom door. Every single night for a week, each time I texted my dad to check, he would open his door and tell me no one was in front of my door. One incident happened when me, my dad, and brother came home to find boxed light bulbs shattered all over the basement floor. And another incident was when we came home at night, sat down, and heard a loud thud come from the basement. We called the police to investigate, and they found absolutely no one anywhere in the house. Freaky stuff. Let me know what you think was happening in my house. I'm not sure if it was a demon, but it sure was negative and was trying to taunt me. Thanks for reading.